Most of our juries on all dates are present, and Mr. Williams may continue to read the representation.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Hello.
So before you get recrossed, just to bring out the fact that, who did you have lunch with today?
With you.
And your mom too?
Yes, and my sister.
Your sister, okay, and my daughter?
Yes.
And my law club, right?
Yes.
Okay. We all went together, we had lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, who paid for lunch?
You did. Thank you.
Well, my daughter made me go. So, some of the questions that counsel asked you earlier, one of them was about visiting your I guess the dad's side of the family in the high desert. Remember that?
Yes.
And you said that you went once a year.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Maybe during holidays.
Okay. And does that mean, were you also saying when you said that your dad goes there once a year?
No. No, he would go more often than we did. I just, personally, I didn't go more than once or twice a year, but I know that he went more frequently because his family lived up there.
Now, do you know how many interviews you gave in this case? Was it just that one interview with Detective Steers?
Yes, I believe so.
And I think you said on cross-examination that I think you got the building you were living at, he left a card, or somebody left a card there.
Yes, he left a card, his business card for the sheriff's department at the front desk. Because what the front desk lady told me was that an officer came in, asked for me, and asked what apartment I lived in. And she, just as the management office, she wouldn't give him that information because she, obviously wants to protect the people living there. So he left his card, and on the back of the card he wrote that he was looking to contact Catherine Jarvis and Chase Merritt about the McStay case.
Okay, so you weren't living with your mom and dad then, correct?
No, I was living in Riverside with my boyfriend.
Okay, and so obviously if they also wanted to talk to your dad had not been arrested yet.
No.
And to your knowledge, he wasn't a suspect or anything. Did you think anything about that at that time?
I mean, since I had kind of been following the case, I had, read some theories online, but as far as I knew in terms of what the detectives were doing, I didn't know who they were looking at that point.
Okay. And you voluntarily went in and spoke with Detective Steers?
Yes, well, I invited him to my apartment and he
came. Okay. And then everything you told Detective Steers that day when you did this interview is the same that you testified, relatively the same, not word for word, but it's relatively the same testimony. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. You've never changed anything that you said.
Objection.
Have you? Have you ever changed anything that you told Detective Steers about the important facts of your interview?
Not that I know of, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And did the district attorney's office ever subpoena you as a witness to come to court?
No, they never subpoenaed me.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So you were just asked a couple of minutes ago about family going up to the desert, right?
Yes.
And when Detective Steers interviewed you, he talked to you about being truthful, right?
Yes.
And he talked to you about your dad's side of the family, right?
Yes.
And when you referred to your family, you talked about, you used the term we, right?
Yes.
And so you never said, we would go to the desert once a year and my dad would go on his own, right?
No, because I wouldn't include myself in his visits, if that makes sense.
It does, but you
Yeah.
also didn't make it a point to tell the detective that your dad would go up
No, I didn't think that, he didn't ask, he was asking about me, so.
So the way that he asked it to you, does this sound familiar? Do you guys socialize with other family members a lot or anything like that? So that would be more than just you, right?
Sure. Yes,
And the way that you responded was to say we, as in the group, right?
as in the whole family, yes.
And then you were also asked about, specifically about the arguments that occurred on the fourth, right?
Yes,
And you indicated that the argument occurred in terms of the phone call being ignored, that argument ensued for several days, right?
yes, I mean, the content of the conversation kind of changed over the course of that several days, but it stemmed from that initial argument about the missed call.
And you were referred to pages, I think defense started to refer you to page, indicated that you had reviewed pages 32 through 34, right?
I don't know the page numbers, but if,
So I'm gonna ask you to review that with me, where in there it says that argument ensued over the entire weekend. Starting with the top of page 32, and you can show me when you get to the spot.
It's line 32, page 32, line 12.
She's reviewing this section.
That's where it starts though.
where do I stop?
Just let me know when you get to the point where you told the detective that the argument lasted the entire weekend, rather than just that night.
Your Honor, the
Yes,
question,
sir.
the form of the question is irrelevant. It's my interpretation of the,
The objection to overrule.
So I,
Okay, so
Yeah.
what are you referring to?
the bottom of page 32, when I said over the next couple of days, he was talking about it.
Okay, so what you're referring to is, I think over the next couple of days, he was like, okay, this is weird. And that's referring to the fact that the McStays weren't answering his calls, right?
Yes.
But where in here does it say that your parents argued about that for the whole weekend? That's what I'm asking.
The detective only asked me about that night.
So you didn't actually tell the detective, like you testified to previously, that your parents argued for the entire weekend over that issue, right?
It wasn't that they argued about it the entire weekend. It was that over the next couple of days, when my dad wasn't able to get a hold of Joseph, it became kind of like, okay, this is out of the ordinary, and my mom continued that conversation by saying, well, see, you should have picked up your phone when he called you, like you should have picked it up.
The question that was posed to you,
Mhm.
specifically by defense counsel, was, did the argument extend through the entire weekend? And you were referred to pages 32 through 34 of the transcript.
Okay,
Okay, and you did see anywhere in there where you told the detective that that argument extended over the weekend, right?
no, he was asking me about the night of the phone call.
Defense counsel's question to you, though, was about an argument over the weekend. My question to you is solely, did you see anything in those pages that referred to an argument over the weekend?
No.
Okay. And it was actually something your parents argued about frequently, right? The
Yes.
fact that your dad wouldn't answer phone calls.
Yes.
And so, in terms of the night of the 4th, you being 15 years old at the time, you had a boyfriend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Spent a lot of time on the phone talking
It was at that point, it was mostly texting
Okay.
on a flip phone.
Okay, and you were in school at the time, right?
Yes,
And you were involved in extracurricular activities.
correct.
And it's your independent memory as you sit here today that that argument specifically happened on the 4th.
Yes,
You distinctly remember it being February 4th.
yes, I do.
How is it that you remember it distinctly being February 4th when you told the detective you were at the movies that night first, right?
Right?
And now you're saying you weren't at the movies?
Well, I said that in the interview with him as
Okay.
well.
But you also said now, today, that perhaps we were down at the clubhouse watching a movie, right?
Yes.
But you never told that to the detective either, right?
No, I just clarified that I didn't think we were at the movie theater.
But you told that to the detective at the time.
Yes.
And you've reviewed multiple materials about this particular case, right?
Yes.
And you looked at multiple sources of articles and things like that, right?
Yes.
And you're sitting here telling us that it's your testimony that that argument specifically occurred on the 4th.
Yes.
Were you aware of facts that showed that that phone call from Joseph McStay to the defendant's cell phone was never actually received by the defendant's cell phone?
I am not aware of anything like that.
You've been sitting in trial though, right?
Yes.
And that's just a piece of evidence that you actually didn't hear?
Well, I don't want to talk about phone records because I'm not versed in them, but it's my understanding that there
My
are.
question to
Okay.
you is solely, is that evidence that you actually heard?
Possibly.
Did you have a conversation with your dad about that?
I mean, we talk about the case all the time, so probably.
Now, you also testified about some facts that your dad was irresponsible with money, right?
Yes.
And today, you gave a more detailed explanation than you gave to the detective back then about what you meant by that, right?
Yes.
And you testified that your dad was actually more concerned, the reason he was irresponsible was because he was more concerned with putting money towards new ideas or inventions, right?
Yes.
But you also told the detectives that your dad spent time at the casino, right?
Yes.
And you told them that, he would do that when you guys needed money for car payments and rent and things like that, right?
Occasionally.
What do you mean by occasionally?
I mean, if there was a little bit of extra money, I mean, he wouldn't risk not being able to pay rent in order to go to the casino instead. It would be more of like if there was a little bit of extra money that, you know, he could kind of put towards that if he thought, you know, he would do well in a tournament or something like that.
Okay, so your testimony now is that he wouldn't go to the casino and risk not being able to pay rent? Is that, am I understanding you correctly?
The objection sustained under evidence code 352, and it's cumulative.
But you never told the detective back then what you meant about your dad being irresponsible with money, right?
Sustained.
Who else was in the office when you went over your statements with Mr. Moline?
At his office,
Yes.
he has a secretary that was coming in and out. The second time that I went there, my mom showed up it was quite like maybe an hour and a half after I had been there.
So that's not my question though. My question to you specifically is who was in the office when you went over your statements with Mr. Moline?
My statements,
When you went over, you testified
Yes.
previously that you listened to your statements about 2 to 2.5 times,
yes.
right?
hmm
Who else was in the office with you and Mr. Moline when you went over your statements?
I was in the office.
It's irrelevant longer. I have a big office, there's multiple people.
Sustained on relevance against evidence code 352.
You You testified just a few minutes ago that you went to lunch with Mr. Moline today, right?
Yes,
And you also have his cell phone number, right?
yes.
And you'll text him on occasion, right?
Rarely, but yes, I have texted him.
And did you talk about the case at lunch?
It was more general feelings, like how I was feeling being up here and kind of more of that nature.
Did you talk about your testimony with your mom?
No. I told her kind of what it's like being up here versus sitting over there like I have been. It's much different.
And you testified that your dad never has told you to lie, right?
Correct.
Did he ever talk to you about things that you need to remember before you testify?
No, I don't think so.
Do you know of any reason, or were you present during any conversation when he told your mom things that she needed to remember before she testified?
I've been present for him asking her if she remembered certain things.
Do you remember him specifically telling her she needed to remember things a certain way?
Not a certain way, I don't think.
And you also talked to your dad about the documentary, right?
Yes.
And you talked to him about the fact that you had reviewed some of it.
Section 352.
That objection is overruled, last answer remains.
And you also talked to him about the fact that you reviewed the footage from the documentary and talked to your dad about how good it was, right?
I didn't review any footage, but when they're filming, I was kind of able to see the lighting that they used and stuff. I was able to see the empty screen before anybody was on it, but I didn't watch any footage.
And the documentary is something that you've been a little bit excited about, right?
Yes?
And you testified just a few minutes ago that you only gave one interview in this case, and that was to Detective Sears, is that right?
Yes.
But that's actually incorrect because you've given interviews to the documentary people as well, right?
I thought he meant interviews to law enforcement. So yes, the documentary interview would count as well, I guess.
And how many interviews have you actually given?
Maybe, so including law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay, 3.
Is that a give or take?
Yeah, because, I mean, sometimes just to get some extra footage, you know, the documentary, the camera will kind of film us walking to our car or something, so I don't know if that counts, but yeah, give or take 3.
I can have just a moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, may we approach briefly? I never ask. To be fair.
You broke your street there.
I know. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Just one
Oh,
second.
I'm sorry.
Great. Okay, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Anything further on recross?
Just briefly.
Or redirect, I'm sorry.
So counsel brought up to you, you were asked to refresh your recollection with pages 31 through 33. Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
Do you recall me also referring to pages 32 through 34 or 36, something like that, like give you additional pages?
I don't know what the page numbers were, but yes.
But I wanted to take a look, I think she directed you to page 32, 33. If we continue on, this was in reference to the argument or discussion over a period of, I guess, days after the phone call, correct? Okay. You could just take a look at, and if you could just look at 31 through 36, just to be, just to be clear. Okay.
At the top of 31, or
Sure.
What, may I ask counsel what the question is?
Yes.
That you're asking her
Does
to?
you make reference to the conversation or argument that your parents were having regarding your telephone phone? And how you characterize that?
okay.
So, as you were trying to explain to the district attorney, you didn't always refer to it as a argument, did you?
No.
Okay. And Detective Spears, in fact, is calling it a conversation, is that correct?
Yes.
And is that what you meant by it wasn't always an argument, that when it changed, I guess its form, it became more of a discussion of, I told you so, that type of thing?
Objection lead?
Yes, and I said it earlier. It started as an argument, and this was an argument that they would get in all the time when my dad wouldn't pick up. And then this particular time, I mean, the kind of the argument / conversation extended because over the next few days, it became stranger and stranger that my dad wasn't able to get a hold of Joseph because, I mean, they talked on the phone like 10, 15, 20 times a day. So it was really strange that he wasn't able to get a hold of him.
So on page 33, when Detective Spears says then over the next couple of days after that, remember that day your parents had that conversation. So he's referring to it as a
Objecting to
conversation.
hearsay and improper refreshing of memory?
Detective Spears is referring to that as a conversation that your parents were having over that phone call, is that correct?
Yes.
And then again on page 36, Detective Spears is asking or commenting on the problem that your parents were having because your dad wasn't answering the phone when people tried to get in contact with him. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then he refers specifically to the
Objection
days.
hearsay.
overruled.
Yes,
You look back to the exact day of the argument over the, phone call from Joseph that, your dad didn't answer, is that correct?
yes, and I said there's arguments after that.
Do you remember the name of you said that Joseph would come and, you guys would go out to dinner. Do you remember, was there a specific I think you said that there was a restaurant?
Yes.
Did it have a name?
Objection sustained is can move.
Nothing further, thank you.
Anything else?
Just one question. On that same page 36 that you were reviewing
Yeah.
about arguments between your parents also had arguments because your mom felt like your dad was digging you into a hole financially, right?
Right, because he just wouldn't keep track of what he was doing.
Yeah, that's not what you told the detective. You limited it to your
Objection,
dad digging
argumentative.
you into a hole financially.
Overruled. Go ahead, you finish your question.
Again, that's not what you told the detective that day though, right? You explained to him only that your mom and dad would argue because your dad was digging them into a hole financially, correct?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Any objection to, Ms. Jarvis being excused?
Subject to recall.
Sure. So you're excused from the witness stand, and I assume they know where to find you from anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
I might be sitting in the front row.
Sure. You can call your next witness.
It's, Catherine Jarvis.
Catherine Ann Jarvis, Catherine Jarvis.
Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Jarvis. Do you know Charles Merrick?
Yes, of course.
And how do you know him?
We dated, we lived together, and we had children together.
And when did you meet, Mr. Merrick?
Late, 1993.
And was it at that time that you, started to have a relationship?
Yes.
How did you guys meet?
Dancing at a club.
And did you, soon after that, have a child together?
Yes.
And who was that?
Sarah Jarvis Taylor.
The daughter who just testified?
Yes.
And did you also have additional children after that?
Yes.
How many?
2 more. Another daughter and a son.
Their ages?
Our other daughter is 18 now, and our son is 14.
And in 1993, were you employed?
Yes, I was.
And what was your occupation?
I worked for a water company.
Like water that comes out of our faucets company?
Yeah, water utility.
And was that here in Southern California? Whereabouts?
The office that I worked out of was in, oh my gosh, Rowland Heights area.
And to your knowledge, was Mr. Merrick working?
I don't know.
did Mr. Merritt, soon after you met, start a, water fountain or waterfall company?
No,
Did he start any type of business?
yes.
What type?
He had told me about, interests he had and, design ideas he had, and, jotted a few things down, and, they sounded interesting, and, he said he would like to pursue starting a business making metal art.
And did he, start a business doing metal art?
Yes.
And what is that metal art? What is it? Is it what I envisioned? You bend metal up and,
Yes, it's like, bent metal pieces welded together and to make pictures or whatever, and they hung on walls.
okay. And was he successful at that?
Eventually, yeah.
So he did that for a while?
Yeah, probably 7 years, 7, 8 years.
Did he eventually get into the, water fountain business? Do you recall when that would have been?
Late, 1999.
And were you guys together at that point?
We were back together at that point.
There had been a break in the relationship, is that correct?
Yes.
And how long was that? When did that break start and when did it end?
It started, probably mid, 1994, and, then resumed in, late, or mid 1999.
Was it at that time that, in mid-1999, that Mr. Merritt was then getting into this water fountain business?
Well, he was still doing the metal art, but yeah, he talked to me as we were, again, starting to date and stuff, that he was interested in maybe building waterfalls and wanted to try to do that, and he was thinking about selling the metal art business.
Okay. And eventually he started his water fountain business, is that correct?
Yes,
And did you assist him?
yes.
And did he have this business, like, was it started in a big factory somewhere, or how was it started?
You know, it was started at our house, actually, mostly in the driveway, and we had like a little, not a shed, but it was like an enclosed, porch area that he worked
And where was this?
in San Dimas.
And so, when you say build waterfalls, are these big waterfalls, small waterfalls?
They started off small, he was doing terracotta pots first, and then, we moved to, PVC piping, like, sewer pipes, they're kind of big, 6, 9, 10, 12 inches in diameter, and he was making pillar waterfalls,
And
moved on from there.
did the making of the waterfalls eventually lead to, Mr. Merritt making the waterfalls in a location other than your home?
Yes, he eventually got a shop outside of our home and started making them out of there.
And when would that have been?
Probably 2002, maybe?
So for a couple of years at least, maybe a little bit more, they were being built at your home?
Yes.
And did you guys, were you still working with them this entire time?
Yeah, sort of on and off. I was, going to the home and garden shows with them, helping deliver waterfalls, calling customers, talking to customers.
Okay, so in some fashion, you stayed involved.
Yes.
And then when Mr. Merritt moved into his first shop, you were also involved at that point?
Yes.
And where was that first shop?
San Dimas.
It was still in San Dimas?
Yes.
Was it a big super shop or was it a small shop?
It wasn't super big. It was maybe the size of this court, well, a little smaller than this courtroom. It had like a reception area and then a shop in the back for building where all the equipment was.
And were orders coming in more frequently than before? Is that why you needed
Yes.
to move?
Yeah, he was starting to, build waterfalls for home and garden shows, so we would need a larger place to put them, because he would build, 12 to 20 waterfalls for the shows, and then sell them at the shows.
In the industry, you became familiar with the industry, I take it, at that point?
Yes.
And did Mr. Merritt have any particular skill in building waterfalls? Did he have a unique skill in building waterfalls?
He had, in my opinion, a unique skill in building things. Like he could do electrical work, he could do plumbing, he could fix cars. He had a lot of knowledge about how to put things together. So he was very creative.
So, coming from the metal art business, the pieces that he made in metal art, was that somehow incorporated into his fountain work?
Eventually, yeah, he started welding the fountains out of metal to hang on the walls.
Was that somewhat of a kind of a unique feature when it came to waterfalls?
Yes, it was. Most of the waterfalls at that time were freestanding, glass and metal. Now, there weren't a whole lot of hanging waterfalls, or they were built-in sort of things, prefab.
So, did that uniqueness lead to people buying more of them?
Yes.
And so in 2002, when you moved into that San Dimas warehouse, did you again make a move from there, or did you stay there?
Yeah, we moved again to a facility in Pomona, I believe. That was a little larger, more high-tech, and it was cheaper, I think, because we were sharing the space with another company. So Chase was essentially subletting their warehouse area so that he could build the waterfalls there.
And did you eventually meet Joseph McStay?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
I don't know the year. I just know that it was kind of a gradual process. I know Chase started, talking about him, and this guy is interested in selling our waterfalls, and he's coming out to watch me do this, or and then their friendship kind of gradually progressed, and then I eventually met him.
And where would you have met Joseph McStay for the first time?
I think I met him at the shop,
Do you remember which shop it was?
probably the one in Pomona.
And, well, I know you don't know the exact year you met him. Is there a time when you moved out of the Pomona shop?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
Not exactly.
Okay. Well, you went to Joseph's wedding, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
No, I know my son was probably about 2, maybe 2.5, so.
So what would that mean?
2007-ish.
Okay. I'm gonna show you a couple of exhibits since we mentioned the wedding, 979 and 980. Show you 980 first. These are not the greatest. Maybe as good. Oh wait, this is a little bit better. You recognize that photo?
Oh, yeah.
And what are we looking at?
This is a picture of Joseph's wedding.
And are you in this photo?
Yes.
Can we see you?
I'm standing kind of right between the 2 girls.
There should be a pointer there.
Oh.
You'd have to turn around and do it on the screen.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's me.
Okay. And is Mr. Merritt there as well?
Yes, that's him and our daughter and our other daughter, and I don't know what our son is, but,
And then I'll show you exhibit 979. Looking at that photo.
yes. That's also at the wedding.
So I take it by the time that you went to the wedding, Joseph had already been to the shop?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And do you know how long before the wedding Joseph would have made his first visit to the shop in Pomona?
At the point that we went to his wedding, they were already doing business together for a couple of years, so.
Were they doing a lot of business, or were they just kind of getting the feel for each other?
It progressively got more and more. At first, Joseph was just doing prefab, waterfall sales on his website,
Can
and
you just hold on, describe what that is, a prefab waterfall on his website?
it's waterfalls built from other companies that were like already assembled, like, usually they were glass and metal waterfalls, or, like plastic, things that were just very simple, very, had a top and bottom, sometimes lights, and,
Would Mr. Merritt build these, or would he buy these waterfalls?
the prefab ones were bought from someone else.
Okay.
Mr. Merritt, or Chase only did the custom waterfalls for Joseph.
Okay. So Joseph was only doing the prefab online type sales, correct?
Before he met Chase, yes.
Okay. And eventually, when they started doing business together, was it only the custom type waterfalls?
The custom orders started taking up more of Joseph's business, yes.
So, do you recall, let's use the wedding as our point of reference. Did business increase around that time, 2007, 2008?
Yeah, it was steadily moving up. They were starting to do a lot more volume, or not just volume, but more expensive waterfalls.
And did you get a chance to, you said that they became very close, is that correct?
Yeah,
And would you say they became friends?
yes.
And would Joseph come to your home, or would he visit your family?
Generally, Joseph didn't come to the house, because usually Chase was at the shop, so that's where they spent most of their time together. We did on occasion go out to dinner after, they got off work, and, we spent time together that way. But, we didn't really go over to their house much either. Like, I've been there a couple of times. We went to a birthday party. It was just mostly, Joseph and Chase spending time together.
And were you still working with Chase at this time?
No.
When did you stop working with Mr. Merritt?
Probably, when we had the shop in San Dimas, he eventually hired a receptionist, cause we just kept butting heads about how to best take care of customers and get orders out and things, and I thought I was right, he thought he was right, and it was causing too much friction between us, so.
Did you guys have disagreements on how business should be run?
Yes, definitely.
Who was the more fiscally responsible person in the business?
Me.
So Chase was not, his skill didn't lie in the management of monies, I take it.
No.
What was he focused on the waterfalls?
He was very artistic, very creative. He could build anything, and he was a hard worker, and that's what he spent most of his time doing.
And as Chase and Joseph got closer and started doing more business, did you still keep your hand on the pulse of the business? Did you find out, did you guys talk, did you and Chase talk about what was happening and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I still ran errands for him, I still, you know, came into the shop to see what he was working on because he was excited about something, you know, new that he was doing and wanted to show me. Or, you know, he'd ask my advice about maybe design features and things like that.
When Joseph would come and visit Chase at the shop, as you indicated, let's say after the wedding, let's say they were born in 2008, did Chase still have a shop at that point?
Objection,
No.
speculation, foundation.
Ooh. I'm sorry, in 2008?
Right, if we're using the wedding, like after the, around the time of the wedding or after the wedding, was there still a shop in Pomona, or did that change at some point?
Yeah, we moved, to another shop in Claremont, after the Pomona shop, so,
Do you remember when that was?
not exactly.
Before or after the wedding?
Oh, after.
Okay. And, did you ever visit that shop?
Yes.
Do you know how long Mr. Merritt was at that shop?
For about a year, I think.
Is that where he met, was he already doing business with Joseph at that time?
Yes, he was already doing business with us.
And then, was there a, well, let me, at this point, let's say 2009, did you move to Rancho Cucamonga?
Yes,
And this is your home I'm talking about now.
yes.
Where did you move to?
We moved into a home on Wilkins Avenue in Rancho Cucamonga.
How long were you there?
Almost 2 years, I think.
Did you at some point move to Church Street?
Yes.
When did you move to Church Street?
After we moved out of there, so into 2009.
The end of 2009, you moved to Church Street.
Yes.
Okay. And was there a name for that place?
Homecoming, I believe.
I'm show you exhibit 977. Let me do recognize this.
Yeah, vaguely. I think that's a side street, one of the side streets to the complex.
I'm gonna just read this and then have you take a look.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, so that would be, is that the complex that you moved to?
yeah.
Now I'm gonna show you exhibit 978. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
So what is that?
That's a bird's eye view of our apartment complex.
Now, your daughter, when she testified, she wrote where the clubhouse was and where your actual home was in that complex. Can you see her markings?
Yes,
Is that generally consistent with what you remember as well?
yes. Well, kind of, yes.
What was different?
I mean, I think where she has marked H on here is the front. We lived in this one here.
Okay, can you put your mark in, please? Just do H2.
Oh, sorry.
Now, in this particular complex, there was a clubhouse, correct?
Yes.
What were some of the things you could do in that clubhouse?
They have a business center, with computers, fax machines, copier. They had a pool table, they had a movie theater, they had a gym, they had all kinds of stuff.
Did you, when you moved into Church Street, do you recall whether or not you had internet service in your apartment?
We did not.
So would the clubhouse be a place you could go to use your computer for internet stuff?
Yes,
And was that something that Mr. Merritt took advantage of?
yes,
And
much need as they did for it.
What about recreation activities? You said there was movies, you could watch at the theater, things of that nature. Was there also other things you could do recreationally in there?
Yeah, there was a pool, there was, barbecues, there was all kinds of stuff.
Now, was this, would you say, an upgrade from the Filkins Avenue address to this address?
It was definitely a nice complex. I mean, I preferred our house on Filkins. That was, we were in a rent to own there that ended up falling through, and that was kind of where I had planned on, raising my kids. All my hopes and dreams had been at that house, but I mean, this was a nice complex to move to.
Was there good amenities for the kids then?
Absolutely, yes.
So did the kids spend time in that clubhouse?
Yes, definitely.
Sometimes hard to get them out of there.
Sometimes, yes.
And what about Mr. Merritt? Would he use that clubhouse frequently for business activities?
He did go there to make copies and, use the fax machines and, computers a lot.
Now, do you recall if Mr. Merritt had his own computer and printer and stuff like that at your actual apartment in addition to the business facilities?
We did have we had a laptop at home too, and we had, one of those little Wi-Fi sticks that go into the laptop, but, we sometimes had difficulty getting reception.
Okay. So, the clubhouse offered a easy, convenient way of getting.
Yeah, they had a hard, they had a hardwire system, so so we never lost internet there.
So, Exhibit 978 is up there now. And your daughter had marked the clubhouse area, and you said that was consistent with your memory as well, correct?
Yes.
And in relation to where, you made a new mark where your apartment was, correct?
Yeah.
In this area?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you had to drag your kids out of there or get Chase's attention, if he was there, or get him home, how would you communicate? Would you walk over to the clubhouse, or would you call him?
Most oftentimes it was easier just to call, if I could. A lot of times, couldn't get a hold of them that way, so I would end up walking over there and seeing what they were doing or when they were coming home.
And why was it difficult to sometimes call?
I don't know, it just, it was bad reception.
Now, when you moved into that home on Church Street, that apartment on Church Street, was Joseph still coming over and, let's say, you guys were having dinner and things of that nature with Joseph?
Not as often, because we lived further away now, so, I mean, Chase and Joseph would still meet at the shop, but we'd only really meet up like if, I was picking Taylor up from school, because she was going to school in Claremont, so if we were down in that area, then and Joseph happened to be there, and, we were all gonna go out, then we would meet up, but we saw him less often after we moved.
Okay. And, but you'd only moved there at the end of 2009, correct?
Yes.
So when you were in Filkin Street, were you, that's when you were seeing more of Joseph?
Yeah.
In terms of socially?
Well, I mean,
when I say you, I mean you and the kids.
yeah, we saw a lot of him when we lived in the area, so that we were in the area all the time, but as we moved out, farther, me and the kids saw less of Joseph.
What's the area? What do you mean the area?
Well, San Dimas, okay, so when we lived in San Dimas and our shop was, you know, in that area of San Dimas, like, Claremont, Claremont and San Dimas are pretty close together. We would see more of him, we would run into him more often, because I would be in and out of the shop more often. As we moved to the Rancho area, it was like 15 minutes away from that, and, like I wasn't in the area as often.
But you had mentioned these social things where Joseph and you and the kids would, and Mr. Merritt would go to dinner.
Right.
How often did that
I mean,
occur?
we were still in the area because I was picking Taylor up from school or, you know, her activities, and she was still in Claremont, which was close to where the shop was. Because the shop had been in Claremont at that time, so it was, the school and the shop were very close together.
Okay. Let's talk about the year 2009 leading into 2010. Were you still, you and the family, still socially going out to dinner with Joseph when he was, I guess he would, well, that's my question, did you do that?
Yeah, every once in a while. I mean, it wasn't like we did it every day or anything. It was maybe, you know, once a month or something.
Okay. And did you get a chance to observe the relationship between Joseph and Mr. Merritt?
Yes.
And what did it appear to you? Were they friends, just business? What was it?
No, they were more than business partners. I remember an occasion where we were having dinner and Joseph was actually, you know, being very open about, being very nervous about having a second child and, with Summer, and, he was, you know,
That was a conversation you guys had?
that was a conversation we all had at dinner, yes.
And let's go forward to 2010. You recall at some point Joseph and his family were missing, is that correct?
Yes.
You recall approximately when that was?
February 2010.
Just prior to that, just prior to February 2010, in January, at the end of January, did you have an occasion to have one of these dinners with Joseph?
Yeah, I believe so. They were talking about some new projects that were coming up, so, and there were some big projects, so Joseph was really excited about them, and he just couldn't, like, he was almost giddy. He was talking about the Saudi Arabia project. Ooh.
Who was at this dinner?
Me, Chase, my kids, and Joseph.
You recall where you went?
I believe it was, Charlie's Restaurant in Laverne.
And so, they were talking about the big projects that were coming up,
Yes.
and specifically you mentioned Saudi Arabia.
Yes, and, there was some other one, I believe it was gonna be in London that, Joseph was talking about. And that was supposed to be big, and we even talked about our families all going together and making a vacation out of it.
The mood, I take it, was upbeat.
Yes.
So business at this time was going very well on the custom side, is that how you
Yes.
understood it?
Objection, speculation, foundation.
Yes, according to Joseph, this waterfall in London was supposed, was supposed to be in the millions of dollars, so, I mean, he was excited about this, you know, being like the one to make it for the company and us and everybody. He was, you know, excited for his family and stuff, that they were gonna be making a good amount of money.
And Mr. Merritt was going to be doing that project with Joseph?
Yes.
And you also mentioned the Paul Mitchell project.
Objection, McStay's testimony.
Did you mention another project besides Saudi Arabia, and now you just mentioned London? Were there other projects that were mentioned?
At that particular dinner, or, I don't know if we talked about, any other ones at that particular dinner. I just know, like, there was, like, these big projects that were coming up that, I don't remember Paul Paul Mitchell, I mean, I remember Paul Mitchell being talked about, but it wasn't like a big project.
Okay. So the mood is upbeat, this is at the end of January. At that time, the existing, orders that they were fulfilling at that time, was business good?
Yes.
Objection, foundation.
Sustained. The last answer is stricken.
Do you know, well, part of the, well, did you and Chase have disagreements about money through your relationship?
Yes, always.
And let's go to 2009, did those arguments, or not arguments, did those disagreements continue in 2009 even?
Yes.
And what was the crux of those arguments or discussions, or whatever you want to characterize them as?
Just that I felt, we weren't putting enough money aside for savings, we weren't putting enough money aside to build a future. Chase was always more of a live in the now sort of person. And that got frustrating for me as, you know, trying to plan for, you know, my family and the children, going to school and everything, where we were gonna, we moved a lot with Chase, and it was really difficult.
So, going into, was this period of time, looking at your history up until 2010, was this a more stable time now that you had these projects?
It felt
or-
like it was going to be, like, I kind of felt like, okay, maybe all this frustration, all this, you know, was worth waiting for. And then,
Meaning, paradise is around the corner.
sort of, yeah, like maybe, you know, once we have enough, like, established business, like if we get these big projects done, maybe, you know, we could have a house and, you know, things might settle down.
Did Mr. Merritt seem happy at this point?
Yes,
He seemed happy with his relationship with Joseph?
absolutely.
Had Mr. Merritt ever had a friend like Joseph in the time that you were with him?
Not really, no.
Overruled.
In all the time that I know Chase, he doesn't really get close to people. He spent a lot of time with Joseph. They played paintball together and, they spent a lot of time outside of work.
Did Chase also like to play poker?
Yes, for a period of time, yes.
What period of time are we talking about? From when to when? The approximate, nobody, I'm not asking for exact dates, but.
I know, well, the thing with Chase is he gets these little itches that, he gets ideas and he gets super intensely focused on certain things. At one point, it was a bike pedal that he had.
Objection, non-responsive.
Sustained.
Strike.
Overruled.
What do you remember when he went through his poker phase, let's call it that?
It was probably from, it probably started around 2007, I think. I don't think it lasted more than a year, but he was reading all these books and watching the poker tournaments on TV, and, he got it in his head that, you know, he's gonna try his hand at poker, cause he thought it was something he might be good at.
Did he continue to play poker on occasion after 2008?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Did he do other things when he played poker? When he played poker, was it like going to a casino to play poker, or did he play poker with his buddies? How did it?
It was mostly casinos, yeah, he didn't really do, he entered a lot of tournaments, so, and I don't know if you're familiar with tournaments, but, you buy in and then you keep playing until you lose, so, I mean, he might have gone for hours or sometime within a day.
Did you go with him on some occasions?
I did go a couple times with him at the poker, but, I mean, to me, it was just boring, so.
Was him being away playing poker at times, did that also cause some friction?
Yes, it did.
So, on February, well, in the beginning of February, when you found out Joseph went missing, how did you find out?
Mostly Chase. He couldn't get a hold of Joseph, and he stated that, Joseph wasn't calling him back, and, he was leaving messages, and he hadn't heard from Joseph. and
Judge,
was-
hearsay, this is being not for proof of truth, I'd ask for an instruction.
Will show that just the operative fact of, phone calls or messages. So we'll need to,
Do you recall the last day that Joseph had contact with Chase?
Yes,
When was that?
on the 4th of February.
And on the 4th of February, do you recall when did Chase go to work that day?
Yes.
And do you know what Chase did that day, or whether he saw Joseph that day?
Yes, he went to work in the morning, and, he said that he was meeting up with,
well, he said what he was going to do,
yes,
or will,
So when he left for the day, he said he was going to do what?
he went to work in the morning, and he said he was on his way to meet Joseph for lunch and pick up checks.
let me, interrupt you at this point. We'll take our, afternoon recess, just 10-15 minutes. Keep in mind that we had admissions previously given to you, not perform or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case. We'll see everyone back in about 15 minutes.